Hey. I'm not really sure where this conversation is going to go. Um, I want to talk about loneliness. But I don't really know where to begin with that. Um, I have been lonely for a very long time. For a very long time. I've been the last relationship that I was in was 6 years ago, and it was very toxic, and I always considered myself a lost soul back then because I didn't really know anything about myself, and I was still heavily repressing a lot of a lot of parts of my identity. And so, even during that relationship, I wasn't in a place to really receive the benefits of a relationship, like genuine affection and love and companionship and all those things. It was more like I was on autopilot, and then years before that, I went through a phase of homelessness. That was the first time that I was homeless, in my early to mid-20s. And before that, that was my last real relationship with someone that I felt I could be myself with, at least as much of myself as I knew back then, if that makes sense. I mean, we were young, and I was very young, and relative to now, and there was still there were a lot of things that I needed to figure out on my own first, in order to even begin to start having conversations with the person that I was with at the time, and we never really got to that point, unfortunately. Bad choices and life circumstances and all of that just ended the relationship after, I don't know, a few years that we were together, and we had been through a lot. We had been through a lot together, that we had gone through together as a team, but it was the first and only relationship in my life that I've ever experienced where I felt I truly desired. And I don't just mean like in an intimate way, but like this person genuinely enjoyed being around me and like couldn't get enough of me at times, you know. I had never experienced that ever in my life before. In fact, it was always the exact opposite. And so, you know, that relationship left a significant, you know, mark. It it was filling a hole in my heart that I had always had prior to it, and then when it ended, the pain of that hole becoming empty again hit harder than anything I had ever, you know, been through before, and it stayed with me for many, many years. In fact, there's still a part of me that feels it, even now, even today. And, you know, there's been a lot of heavy grief and, you know, attempted acceptance. And for the most part, I've made peace with it, and what you know, what will most likely never be again, that specific situation with that specific person and everything, and because that's something that I, you know, had subconsciously chased for a very, very long time. You know, we're talking 15, 16 years ago, and it wasn't until probably just in the last few months or maybe sometime last year when I finally came to the realization that I had to let it go. But anyway, I didn't mean to get into that much detail on that whole specific relationship, but I think it's good context because it's been that long since I've felt anything close to that. You know, especially the feeling of being around someone who like genuinely wants to be around me, who wants to hold me, who wants to see me as I truly am. You know, see through the flesh and bones, and look into my eyes, look into my soul, look into my heart. And that's something that I find myself grieving a lot lately. Not necessarily that specific circumstance, but just the feelings of something like that, you know. And I've been over the last year and a half, I have been telling myself to make peace with that, and I have in some ways, you know. I've definitely learned. It's one of the things that I am most grateful for, is that I got to experience even a fraction of that in that previous relationship, 15, 16 years ago. But ever since then, this whole time I've just been kind of, it's been a major motivator to keep going through life, to go through everything that I've been through since then, and all of the struggles and difficulties, and it hasn't been an easy road. I'm not comparing trauma, I'm not bragging or anything like that, but I'm just acknowledging that it's been really tough. And people have asked me over the years, like, how did you get through that, or how are you getting through this, or like, most people in that situation would have given up, or would have died, or would have, wouldn't have made it. Like, how did you do it? And the truth is, I always had hope that I would find some kind of relationship that brought me those feelings that I mentioned, the feelings of like genuine affection and compassion, and I'm not sure if unconditional love can truly exist in the physical reality that we're in, but as close to it as possible, and that's my secret. That's what has kept me going through everything. And I lost that hope last year. I think by March, after everything that I had gone through in the first few months of the year, and the thing with Hawaii, and there's a lot more details around that I haven't shared much, but one of the main things that I was chasing when I got on that one-way flight to Hawaii, expecting to leave this version of reality or my life behind for good and go somewhere where my hopes and my dreams were there, where they were reality, they were waiting for me, and they all centered around that hope, that desire, that connection with someone that made me feel those ways, and that I made them feel those ways, like in a mutual type of bond. Some people might call it like a soulmate or something, and you can put whatever label or term you want on it, but and obviously it didn't happen, and then the subsequent experiences that I had once I returned to Arizona, obviously I had to start picking up the pieces of my life, like logistically and stuff. But I had these ongoing experiences throughout the year that kept me in a very dark place, in a very dark way of existing. And it was ever since then that I lost that hope, the thing that I had been holding on to for 15 years. And so the once I came to that realization, which was maybe by the middle of last year, that's when I just spent the second half of the last year just like in this intense grieving process. And it was, it was one of the hardest things I've ever grieved, and it's weird if it's I almost feel like selfish saying that, because like I've lost so much and so many people and important beings in my life, starting from a young age. And but it's true. It was the hardest. It's been the hardest grieving process that I've ever gone through. And it got so bad that I couldn't handle it on my own anymore. It brought me to a place where I have to be careful what I say about this, especially I think on something like YouTube. But it got me to a place where throughout the year I had been, I had been preparing for no longer being here, and putting a lot of thought into it, putting a lot of intention into it. Making sure that it would be done in a way that minimized the amount of trauma and suffering that anyone involved in my life or involved in that final experience would be as minimally impacted as possible. And also, doing good while I still was able to. I had lists of, things that I wanted to do, even in the, the kind of destitute situation I was in, where I was, in the process of being evicted, and I had sold all my material possessions, and I had, spent all my savings on rent because I had lost my job in the beginning of the year, and but there were still things that I wanted to do to help in whatever way I could, cooking meals for people in need, that kind of thing. And I also put a lot of intention and thought into like the ceremony, but anyway, the grief of everything, on top of all of the constant experiences that I was having somatically and externally as well. These are things that I still live with to this day. The only reason I'm still here and able to live with them is because, like I said, it got to the point where I recognized that if I didn't try something, that it was very quickly going to be like, one of the final experiences of my life. So I did get on medication. I got on an SSRI. It's called Lexapro. It was a little tough the first couple of weeks, but then it kind of leveled out, and it then became like almost a miracle, because it created this like emotional distance, this emotional buffer, to where I could think about these things and about the feelings and the grief involved behind these thoughts and these decisions and everything. But I could think about them and reflect on them, but like without the attached emotions to them, if that makes sense. So it felt very freeing in a lot of ways. It allowed me to focus on practical things like taking care of myself and, finalizing the whole getting evicted and, selling all the rest of my possessions. There was a lot of coordinating with that because I did it all myself, and I did it on like OfferUp and stuff, and it was just, chaos. And then I built my SUV into a little off-grid camper with solar panels and all that stuff. I put a bed in the back, a little twin bed. It's actually right next to me. So the medication has helped, and the reason I'm giving all this context is because it's relevant to now, because it is still one of the things that's keeping me going, and but ever since I started it and started to help after the first couple of weeks, there's been one thing that I've noticed consistently is that this way of living on the SSRI it's keeping me alive, and it's allowing me to keep my executive functioning at a level that allows me to get through my days and be productive and make appointments and care for myself and all of that stuff. But it also feels like just another version of being on autopilot, and I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if maybe I need to increase my dose, or if I'm ready to come off of it and feel all of those emotions again. I don't really cry that much anymore. But before I started Lexapro, I was literally bawling my eyes out all day, every day, to the point where I, couldn't even properly take care of myself, and because I just was an emotional train wreck. And after starting the Lexapro, I was able to, reflect on and think about those things that were triggering such, intense emotional responses, but without having the emotional responses. So, I'm aware that if I were to taper down and stop with the SSRI, that those emotional responses might come back, and I'm not necessarily sure that I am ready for that or that I want that to happen. But I'm lonely. I'm very lonely. And, I'm fairly active in an online support group. I've made some friends on there over the months, and, some of us keep in touch every week or two, just kind of quick text check-in, how are you? Sometimes I join the weekly video group calls. Sometimes I don't. Even when I do join them, I don't usually share anything that I really need to share or really need to talk about, because I'm not necessarily looking for solutions, and that's a tough thing to for some people to grasp. Like, it's tough, and I get it. Everyone, like, they want to help. There's a natural instinct to just want to offer some kind of solution, or, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Maybe you should do this, blah, blah, blah. And aside from the fact that I pretty much have tried everything that is always recommended to me, or I'm actively doing those things still, sometimes just being able to vent and even cry, and, be vulnerable and admit to a group of kind of strangers that, like, I'm lonely, and nothing is helping and nothing is fixing it, and I don't know how to find someone in my life that will care about me, and someone that can be within physical proximity. Like, it doesn't need to be romantic. It can be completely platonic, but just, being held in, like, the kind of way where, like, have you ever been hugged or held before when you really needed it, and you never got that feeling of, like, okay, is this going on for too long? Okay, I need to let go. Okay, I'm bothering this person, or okay, I have stuff to do, or they have stuff to do, or, like, all of the million and one things that can pop up and interrupt that kind of a moment. But have you ever, like, been able to just, like, stay in that moment for as long as you needed, and just be held and, like, seen and received and loved, and, like, not be a burden? Because I haven't. And I'm trying to figure out, any possible ways that I might be able to experience that, even like a fraction of it, I think would help. I don't know all the super science with this next stuff, but I do know that, like, our brain releases oxytocin when we experience physical forms of affection and love, like hugging and like intimacy and I don't know, that kind of thing. And there are some natural ways to get your brain to release that chemical too, like running. You can like hug a stuffed animal, which I do, but I guess the amount of oxytocin that is released from those from those methods versus just like, like actually being hugged and loved. It's like a fraction of the percentage, so it's really not doing a whole lot. I mean, for someone like me who hasn't experienced the release of oxytocin in my system for many years, maybe even like over a decade, because like I said, the relationship I was in 6 years ago, I was lost. I was a lost soul, and I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know how to be present, and also the person that I was in the relationship with just like wasn't really, like they were just settling for me, and there was like a lot of codependency on both sides, and so I don't really think that counts. So I do think it's been like maybe like 15 years, and this is the part where I said I'm not sure about the science on this. I've been afraid to look it up, to be honest, but I'm sure that has some kind of a profound physiological effect on the brain and the nervous system, and the ability to self-regulate. Um, yeah, so I thought maybe I could find some kind of surrogate option, more stuffed animals, even though I know that they're just like a fraction. um, I know that there are like professional cuddling services. Maybe that might be good for me. To be honest, when I first heard about them and was reading about them was last year, months before I started Lexapro. And it was when I was still in the kind of active planning phase, and I came across the professional cuddlers, and I thought, wouldn't it be so wonderful to like book someone that like I felt safe and comfortable and seen with, to book them for like a night, and again, nothing like weird, nothing like no intimacy or nothing like that, but just like a night of like being held and feeling safe. That was actually my plan for my final night. But that's not how I feel about it right now. I just feel like it would be really helpful. And good for me to experience some of that, with the right person. So, um, so I think I'm gonna look into that, and I think it's gonna require some like effort on my part, because I have a feeling that a lot of like women that are offering other services might be um, kind of hijacking or using that community, you know. And so I think I may need to like weed that out a bit, because I have no interest in anything like that at all, like whatsoever. Um, but if I can find the right person and that kind of thing, then it's absolutely worth it. It could, it could really. I don't want to put you know, too much pressure on it or on myself or anything, but there is a possibility that it could really help. It could be life changing in a small way. So. Um, yeah. That's all. I think that's all I am able to share right now. I'm starting to kind of fall apart here, so. Um, yeah. I'm very lonely, and if you're um, if you're lonely too, if you feel like this as well, then I'm I'm sending you a big hug. Okay, thank you for watching, and I love you.